Okay. So we are live. I'm going to post this to the dashboard here real quick. And we'll say um, we are live. And submit. And let's make sure that that actually works. It does. And so, what are we doing? We're doing, I got a request from an agent today to do a financial analysis on an investment property. So this is investment property financial analysis. Um, so you guys know that when we do a valuation or an comparative market analysis on a residential property, we're typically looking at comparable recent sales, and we are looking at sold price per square foot, and then running the average sold price per square foot, and then multiplying that average sold price per square foot times the subject property's square footage, and that gives us an estimated mid-market value. With investment property, I think I have it open right here. Yeah, this is the property that I've been asked to look at, and it is fourplex and in West Boise, and it's 3840 square feet. Looks pretty cool. I mean, it's got like looks newer. I'll have to check when it's built, and it's like in a little park of or a little neighborhood of similar buildings. It appears another cool one back there. So in any case, it's um, in West Boise. They say it's close to BSU, and it's got all these features. And in reality, none of that matters. It doesn't matter that it looks cute. It doesn't matter that it's close to BSU. Um, Investment property isn't valued by those factors. Investment property is valued by money. How much money does it make? Because an investor with a certain amount of money to spend, they're looking for their best return, right? Where am I going to generate the best rate of return? That's kind of the baseline upon which most decisions are made, at least. Some investors might be like, well, I like this one better. I think it's going to appreciate better over time. Um, that's certainly a reasonable consideration as well. So it's cash flow versus appreciation. Um, I tell investors, or I used to tell investors all the time. Now I encourage agents to tell investors that generally, when you're buying into the Boise market, you're not buying to get cash flow. If you're a cash flow investor, there's better markets to invest in than Boise. The South, the Southern U.S. There's some great cash flow properties. You can buy a property for 100 grand and rent it for, $2,000 a month. It cash flows very well. The problem in those markets is that they're declining markets. And so you're generating cash flow, but the value of the property over time is, it's just a declining area. The Boise is the flip side of that. The Boise market is the flip side of that. When people buy into Boise, they're buying here even at the expense of cash flow not being as good. They want to get into the Boise market because Boise is considered to be an emerging market. We've got, constantly Boise is receiving accolades nationally on the best place for to start a business, and the best place to raise a family, and the best place to have a career, and the best work-life balance. So with that type of national recognition, the Boise market is expected to grow, and as the Boise market continues to grow, the valuation of properties here is expected to begin to achieve equilibrium with that of our feeder markets. So um, it's not, from a resident, that's not good because it's, from an affordability standpoint as a resident, that's not good. As a real estate owner, and a resident, it's great because values are going to go up. The values will oscillate, to be sure, but in the long term, it is expected that to a certain extent, the markets will achieve equilibrium. So as the Boise market grows, expect to find that at some point in the future, the value of properties here, the price of properties here, will begin to get closer to that of our feeder markets. Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, etc., etc. So in any case, we're not here to philosophize, philosophize. I think that's the right word. Philosophize. Now I have to check. Philosophize. Phize. Philosophize. Hey, that's great. You know how every once in a while you say a word, and you're like, that can't possibly be right. Okay, so we are here to do a financial analysis. So let's do one. So if you go to Tova Central Resources, and then down here in the lower right hand corner, we have pro forma financial analysis. This is the form that you use when you're doing a value estimate on an investment property, period. You don't do a CMA, you don't do anything else. You do a pro forma financial analysis. That's an industry standard terminology. If you were a commercial broker at Colliers or Thornton Oliver Keller, you'd be talking about doing pro formas. I'm doing a pro forma. I'm doing a pro forma. I'm doing a pro forma. So instead of a CMA, you're doing a pro forma. So if we open this document here, okay, enable, and then here and here we go. So this Excel document is such that we'll get the windows opened up correctly here so that we have everything looking good. All right, so if we do a print preview of this, file, print, is there not a print preview? There's got to be a print preview. Well, here it is right here, print preview. So this is what the page looks like once it's printed. And it is designed to be exactly what it is, which is raw data and analysis presented in a very organized, straightforward way with no fancy bells and whistles. This is a raw financial analysis. It's not a marketing piece. So let's zoom in just a little bit here and begin to work on this. So top to bottom, we'll go through the whole thing here. So know essentially that the rule of preparing this document is that if you click in an area, and so if I click on this cell right here, and up here you can see that it's an equation equals sum open paren C11 colon C12 close paren. If it's an equation, you leave it alone. It's another equation equals C10 minus C11. Leave it alone. So this one I'm not going to mess with. Closing costs, C10 times D12. I'm not going to mess with that. Down payment, C10 times D11, not going to mess with that. Projected purchase price and list price, these are just straight up numbers. So when I click here, you can see up here it just says 2749. That's not an equation. And when I click here, it says 2749. That's not an equation. So these are numbers that I can change. This is not an equation. It's just an area. This is not an equation. It's just the year built. This is not an equation, just the square footage. This is not an equation, the number of units. So I can modify these things. I've identified I can modify these things. These things are obviously not an equation. That's just my contact info. This is not an equation. Just says 20% up here. 20%. 2%, same thing, not an equation. 30, not an equation. So I can change these things if I want. And that's pretty much the rule of thumb with the entire document. If, when you click on the cell, you look up here and see that it is an equation. If it starts with an equal sign, that's an equation, and you shouldn't mess with it. Leave it as is, because this is calculated based upon other inputs that are that have been added here by you. So using that as our general rule of thumb, let's walk through this and populate it, put in the numbers where we're supposed to put them, and to a large extent, that's all we have to do. We just plug in the numbers, and then this document is designed in such a way that all the calculations are made for you. So starting at the top, we have the property address. So let's go to here and extract the property address. It's 83704. So we'll just highlight all this stuff, get rid of it, and we'll do street, Boise, Idaho, 83704. And I like to spell things out, makes it feel a little bit more formal. So 6784 West Irving Street, Boise, Idaho, 83704. So that the everything doesn't look really busy. That looks really busy. So from just a clean presentation standpoint, I recommend the address, comma, city, state with no comma, and then a double space and the zip code. That's always been the way that I've done it, and I just think it looks the cleanest that way. Alternately, you could do another comma here with no space, but I think this just looks a little bit cleaner. The bench, I don't think it was the bench. I think they said it was West Boise. Yeah, West Boise. So we do West Boise. The year built is, I always forget year built. I know it's somewhere in this territory. 2015. And 2015. Square footage and number of units. Well, it's a fourplex, so it's 4 units. And square footage is 3840. 3840 and 4 units is good. Prepared by my name. There's the office number. There's my cell number. There's my email address. Of course, you would just change this to whatever information, whatever your information is. So, Robert Jones, and then your name, your phone number, your email address. All right, the list price on this property is $585, so $585, and the projected purchase price. Let's see here. We're 1 day on the market. There's not a lot of fourplex. At least there hasn't been in the past. And not that it really matters. I don't know. I think for now, let's leave the purchase price at full price. We can always come back and change that later once we've seen what the rest of the numbers look like. Because we do know that in the Boise market right now, I think about a 6.5 cap, maybe a 6 cap. From an investment standpoint, if you're a buyer and you're trying to buy an investment property, or you're looking at buying an investment property and you're comparing them against each other, the properties with the higher cap rate are going to be the better buys. So if I can buy a fourplex with a six cap, or I can buy a 6.5 cap fourplex, generally speaking, from a cash flow standpoint, the 6.5 cap property is going to be a better buy than the six cap property. So, um, so let's see what this thing caps out at. If we pay full price, let's see what this property caps out at. And if it caps out at, 4%, then it's just way overpriced because buyers in the Boise market are looking for six cap properties or 6.5 cap properties. So let's see where it takes us. And honestly, fourplexes are unique because investors want to get into the Boise market because they feel that this property is going to be worth $1 million in 10 years. They're willing to pay a premium. Yeah, they'll pay 50 grand over market right now, absorb the short term negative cash flow loss because they want to get into the property because they look at it as retirement. Not from a cash flow perspective, but from an appreciation perspective. And so that's just driving prices above what normally would be reasonable and acceptable to most investors. Um, any investor that looks at the Boise market from a cash flow standpoint is just going to be like, no, thank you. I'm not interested. I'm moving on. So the Boise market is an appreciation play, not a cash flow play. Okay, so down payment doesn't really matter. It matters from a like a cash on cash return perspective, but the it does not affect cap rate, and that's primarily how we're going to be judging this property. So the amount that's being put down. So um, cap rate does not take into consideration your financing. You could be 100% financing. You could be own it free and clear. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the cap rate. So for now, let's put in. I'm not going to change this figure because this figure is an equation, C10 times D11, which is, by the way, C10, so 585 times D11, the 20%. So it's that times that. So if I change this to say 30%, watch what happens to the 117. It goes up to 175. So down here, you're going to see that we have these other mechanisms. Um, Cap rate, cash on cash return, annual cash flow, ROI. So for cash on cash return, actually for all of these, the down payment does play a factor. That's why it's here. So the other analyses, not the cap rate, but these guys do take into account that down payment, and that's why it's there. Closing costs, we're going to estimate those at 2.5%. Maybe we'll crank that up to 2.5%. And it goes to 3, so I'm going to right click on that, go to Format Cells, and then in Format Cells, I'm going to change it to 1 decimal place, and that way I can see my 2.5%. And you saw when I changed that to, I go back down right here, it's going to change that to 11.7. I go back to 2.5. You can see it goes back to 14.625. So as I mess with the numbers that are my inputs, the numbers that are my calculations are being updated automatically. So my total investment is a calculation. That's an addition of things above. And the amount financed, same thing. It's the purchase price less the down payment equals the financed amount. So a 30-year term is normal. 5%, I think right now, let's do 5.25, maybe even 5.5. I think 5.25 is probably okay. I haven't checked in about a week, but I know we're in this territory. So So monthly payment is a expense, so it's expressed as a negative. That's what the parentheses mean. It means negative. And then this is simply that times 12. So you can actually see it. Well, it's a funky payment algorithm in Excel, but effectively that's what it ends up being. So, but that's calculated automatically. Again, you can see it's an equal sign, therefore it's an equation, therefore we leave it alone. So we've messed with so far this stuff we've put in, this stuff we've put in, these two numbers we messed with, these numbers we messed with. We could have messed with that if we want, and we could have messed with that if we want. Simply by following that rule of if it's an equation, leave it alone. Otherwise, you're okay. So those are the things that we edit at the top of this page, and then these are the things that are calculated automatically. The things that are not highlighted are the things that are calculated automatically. So that's the top part. As we go down here, we get into rental income. So first we have the units. So let's go back here and see that they're all 2-bed, 2-bath, 2-bed, 2-bath, 2-bed, 2-bath. So we can fix that really quick and just say that they're all 2-bed, 2-bath units. And I'll just copy and paste that down. And then square footage on the units is 960 square feet. They're all the same. That makes our job easy. So again, we can just copy and paste. Lease expiration, we don't have that information unless they've put it in the Docs tab, which is not there. So we're going to, for now, simply specify that we'll put a question. So question, 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 and the same thing for the last rent increase. Now, if you were doing a pro forma financial analysis for a seller, an owner of an investment property has come to you and said, I'd like to list my property. If it's a single family home, you would actually do a CMA and a pro forma. So it's more of a traditional house and marketing it for an investor. So marketing it for a regular buyer and marketing it for an investor. So you would do both. But if an investor owner of a fourplex or a duplex or a triplex or an apartment building or a office building or a retail space or anything, you will do a pro forma financial analysis. And when you do that, you're going to want to ask them for this information. When do the leases expire? When were they last increased? Now, that's good information for prospective buyers to have. In this instance, we don't have that information. We can just question it. Put question marks there for now. It does not impact the numbers of the current situation with the property. So actual rents, let's see here. We've got 950. Nope, excuse me. We've got one at 895 and the rest at 950. These projected numbers right here are generally garbage. In this case, if these ones are running for 950, yeah, sure, this one will run for 952, I would imagine. In many instances, though, if the seller could be charging these higher numbers, then they would. So you want to generally disregard the projected rents, use the actual rents. We've got 895 for one, and then 950 for the remainder. Is that right? Yep. And then this is an this is what we just plugged in. So this is an equation. Equation, equation, equation. This is an equation equals sum of these things. So this is an equation, it equals the sum of these items. This is an equation, it equals that times 12. You can see it right there, F18 times 12. F18, boom, 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 times 12 is that. F18 times 12. And then this, of course, is the sum of these items. And then that's our income. And then here we're projecting vacancy. So you could put in a 5% projected vacancy rate. You could put in a 10% projected vacancy rate. My advice here is to be realistic. If the property is in CUNA, maybe you're at 10%. If the property is next to BSU, like this property is, maybe it's a lot less. Um, I think 3% is probably pretty reasonable given the location of this property, but in the interest of being conservative for our client, 5% is probably a safer number. So, income 42,693 a year after the projected 2247 vacancy loss. Down here we get into expenses, and in expenses, this is where our market here in Boise really begins to show its. We're just, in some regards, especially when it comes to investment property, we're a little bit amateur hour. Primarily because we don't, this person, and no offense to Mike Brown, but the fact that and it's not, I should like take a step back. Mike Brown is a very well respected agent. He knows his business, and he's a very successful guy. Um, with that being said, however, Mike Brown, in this example, and many other agents, many other agents in our market are going to be putting fourplexes on the market just like this, with basic property information and some rent roll information. Um, where what every agent should be doing, including yourselves, if you get a commercial listing, an investment property listing, please put up a pro forma financial analysis with it that includes all of these expenses. Because if you don't cite the expenses of the property, then it becomes impossible for a buyer or an agent representing a buyer. It prevents them from doing a proper financial analysis. So now you're asking somebody to spend, $500,000 on a property, but you haven't really given them the information needed to make an educated decision. Such is our market. So they have told us here that there's a 4.5%, 4.5% property management fee, and there's a $75 fee for new tenants and a $50 fee for renewals. So that's the only info that they've supplied us as far as expenses goes. So um, so this brings us to the failure point of most financial analysis in our market. So when it goes like this, so pretend that just for easy math here, pretend that the power bill is really expensive at this property for some reason. So right now we're at a 5.4 cap. Um, that, what was it before, 65? We'll just do it to, like, let's call it 165. So we go from a 5.4 cap to a 5.19 cap. That's a what, a 2/10 swing, and it was just $100. So if there's other fees that are expensive in there, whatever it might be, we'll put something here in the other column. $200 for whatever, and we're down to a 4.78 cap. So clearly you can see that these expenses play a very major role in the cap rate that's shown here. And therefore, not having this data prevents us from doing a complete financial analysis. That is the challenge in our market. So let's just make sure that we're not missing anything. There's nothing in the docs tab but the CC&Rs, if I recall. Yep, just the CC&Rs. And so yeah, the bottom line is I have to now go to the agent that asked me to help them with the financial analysis, and I have to tell them that the listing agent who is marketing this property has not provided enough information in the listing to be able to prepare a proper pro forma financial analysis. Um, so, what I would recommend is that you talk to your client and tell them, um, educate them about the lack of sophistication in our market. And you don't have to really necessarily put it that way. Um, I guess the right way to put it, honestly, would be to say fourplexes are so easy to sell in our market right now that the agents don't have to do it. It's like if you have a listing and you know it's going to sell the first day, a lot of times you don't feel like it makes sense to incur the expense for the professional photography and for flyer printing and mailers and all the stuff that you would do to market a home. Why would you do that if you know it's going to sell in the first day? Right? That's the mentality a lot of times with single family homes. The mentality with investment property is the investment market here is such a seller's market, um, that if I don't have to do a bunch of research and gather a bunch of numbers and prepare a report, if I don't have to do those things to sell the property, then why would I? And so that's why there's just not a lot of data. There's not a lot of agents that take the time to do it right. So let's just take a quick do a quick search here, kind of a reality check on, whoops, search residential income, and then we're going to go status active, and then we're going to go type fourplex, and we'll do area, Ada County. Yeah, I mean there's only 5 fourplexes in Ada County. And if we add on 3 triplexes, there's 2 more. We were at 5 and then 7, and then with duplexes, probably, yeah, so probably 20. So, but from a multifamily residential standpoint, in Ada County, there's only 20 total fourplexes, triplexes, and duplexes that are available, and only 5 fourplexes at all. Let's take a look at time on market on these things. Okay, this is 47 days time on market. It's contingent sale. So that one is in escrow. Um, Here's one 88 days on market. That's a fourplex. 479.9, and there's a vacancy. I wonder how the units look on the inside. They look all right. That's the vacant one. I bet you they just dolled it up a little bit. Broken. It's on Lake Hazel, out in Maple Grove. So Lake Hazel, south on Maple Grove. So it's way out there, which is probably why. Oh, it's in Charter Point. There you go too. So it's really far out there. For investment property, typically you want to be in the core market. This property out in, I don't want to say it's in the boonies, but it's out there. So here's the freeway, and we've got what, Overland, Victory, Amity, Lake Hazel. So it's out in south, real South Boise. So um, that's probably why it hasn't sold. Let's take a look at the next one here. 16 days on market in West Boise. Price is a lot higher, 545, and the rents are like $800. 545 with rents of $800, because ours was 585 with rents of 950 mostly. Probably the same ballpark, I suppose. Northeast Meridian back on market. These rents are lower, 725, 775, 795, and 725. So here, this person right here is saying pro forma and financials to be provided after making your offer. This is so backwards. It's like, yeah, I'll let you test drive the car after you've told me how much you'll pay for it. It's such a backwards thing. So sorry, Julia Shoemaker. No personal offense intended to you. This is really the as ridiculous as it is. This is really kind of how it goes in our market. This is customary for our market. Is bring me your offer first, and then I'll give you the financials. Um, so yeah, there's only five of them on the market. This one's probably the nicest looking of them, and probably the best location of them. Yet it seems to be relatively comparably priced, given the income. So, on a just a off the cuff, just taking a look at things like just a overview. Yeah, I suppose it looks like a good buy, but I have no way of knowing. I have no way of knowing because I don't know what my expenses are. So if there was no expenses, we could just zero this thing out. They did say that there was a 4.5% property management fee, and when this happens in Excel, it just means that there's not enough room to display it. So if you just widen the column a little bit, it gives you enough room. So 11,585. So yeah. So if there was no expenses at all, then at this price point, it feels like a pretty decent buy. 6.5 cap. That's kind of where buyers want to be. And honestly, I think buyers might want to be there, but our market is probably more like a 6 cap, is what I would imagine properties are actually selling at. Like if you had it's different with fourplexes again. That's just kind of crazy with fourplexes, because the reality is that here, let's pretend that it's Idaho Power is like 30, 60, 90, 120. Let's be conservative and say that Idaho Power is 120 bucks a month, and then 15, 30. We'll call this 60 bucks a month, and we'll call this 60 bucks a month, and we'll call this 40 bucks a month. Snow and landscape, let's call that. If we spread it out over the year, we'll go ahead and call it 30 bucks. Probably more like 60 bucks. I could easily see there being, a $700 bill by the end of the season for, snow and landscape. I would probably actually increase that to something like that, maybe a little bit more. I mean, we did see a fair amount of grass there, but it's just grass. It just really depends on how good the HOA has negotiated their deal. HOA covers landscaping, groundskeeping, trash, parking lot, exterior maintenance, playground. So we have an HOA fee then. So HOA is not specified in a commercial property. So normally we'd see those HOA dues here, but because HOAs are not common in this way for fourplexes or for multifamily for investment property, um, they're not listed there. Let's see if they're. I don't think they're anywhere, honestly. Um, you can see how they've got their projected cap rate empty. They do have their gross operating income of 4490. But that's before their annual expenses, so it doesn't really help us. That's going to be probably the 4490. We've got I changed it here. So if I zeroed everything out again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Taxes, make that 0. So we're getting close up there. I wonder if we change this to 950. 44. We're getting really close. So in any case, I'm going to change these back. Um, so if we're just trying to plug in some our best guess numbers here. So clean in, move out, clean in, move out expenses. Let's say that's 120 bucks a year. People aren't moving out every year, but when they do, you got to pay the amount. Maybe we'll increase that to 20 bucks. Miscellaneous repairs, be really conservative, or I guess really aggressive would be 30 bucks. Conservative would maybe be 60 bucks or even 100 bucks. You could easily see there being $1,200 in annual repairs on a fourplex. You've got, four of everything. Um, so, advertising, we'll say none. Property management fee can take care of that. Property taxes is an annual expense, which is why that number is there. We can, of course, get that number from the tax record. So we'll click on the T for the tax record, and we'll see here that taxes are 69.26, and so we will put that there. 69, 69.26, 69, 69.26, and then we can see our cap rates getting worse. Our cash returns are getting negative. So the property is beginning to not look very good when we even plug in some basic numbers here. So um, we're negative on the cash flow. We are paying our loan down a little bit every year. Um, generally, I would advise you to. Oh, you do have a rate of appreciation, which is here, here. So I recommend that you put in maybe 3% here, or if you want to talk about our market just being a growth market, maybe use a 5% figure here. Um, and that's important because you're going to see that you have this negative cash flow, and if you don't show some appreciation to offset it, then the investment's just not worth it at all. So you have to be able to show that silver lining, and you do that here with the projected appreciation. So that's pretty much it. So just to recap really quick, we plugged in this information, this information, this information, this information, and these guys. We plugged in this guy and this guy, these guys if we had them, these guys, and everything else here is calculated. The vacancy rate we were able to mess with, and then the expenses on a monthly basis we put in. We put in the annual tax amount, and that's it. So if you update these highlighted cells, when you're done, everything else is calculated for you. So to do a pro forma financial analysis, you need only open this document. Oh, and of course, this guy. You need only open this document and modify that guy too. Modify these highlighted cells here. And if you do that, you'll have and this guy right there. If you do that, if you modify these cells and these cells only, don't worry about the stuff over here on the right. If you modify these cells, oh no, I lost it. But if you modify those cells, you will, that's it. I mean, you're done. You've done your pro forma. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to send it to the agent with the caveat that they did not provide any monthly expenses. I've plugged in some numbers that I've pulled out of the air, which might be reasonably correct or might be totally off. And in using those numbers, we come up with a cap rate of 4.6%. It could be marginally better than that. It could be much worse than that, really depending on what the costs are here. So this other, we might put in the other, we might put like there was the agent, or sorry, not the agent, it was the new tenant sign up fees, and then we had the um, renewal or tenant renewal fees. We have no way of knowing, um, if there's we just have no way of knowing which direction tenants are going to go, how long their leases are. So if they're renewing if it's 2 year leases or 3 year leases, this is only going to come up every so often. But in this listing, they showed that it was, oops, go back to here. I think they said that it was 75 for new and 50 for renewals. So 75 for new, if we did $5, that ends up being 60 a year, and renewals, I would just do something like that. Um, and so if we have, and you might want to do make a reference here because this is unique, specific to this property. Um, Specific to this property. And I probably would put in like estimated. And the word pro forma means, it's a Latin word, and it means the form it will take. That's what it actually stands for. Um, and it's getting cut off because this is a number. So just do that probably. But yeah, pro forma means the form it will take. So, meaning an estimate of the future. So, by its very definition, pro forma is not designed to be a this is how it's going to be. It's a forecast. It's a best estimate of the future. Pro forma, the form it will take. So that's it. That's all we can do for this property. If we did have these financials, we'd be able to get a much more precise cap rate, which would be much more valuable for our client. But all we can do is what we can do. I can tell you that the best strategy that you can employ in an environment where you don't have access to even basic information, the best strategy you could employ is to advise your buyers that, um, hey, in our market, there's not a lot of information in the marketing of fourplexes. And the reason why is sellers and agents don't need to really spend a whole lot of time gathering that information because they know there's going to be a buyer out there that just wants to get into our market that is going to be willing to write an offer without that information. So if you can sell a property with no work, or you can sell property with doing a bunch of work, and it's going to be the same either way, what are you going to choose, right? So it's a lazy thing in my opinion, but the reality is in our market, a lot of multifamily residential properties are marketed without proper financials being presented. The expectation is, and it's strange, but commonly considered to be the process, is that you simply write your offer with a due diligence period. So this agreement is contingent upon a 10 business day buyer due diligence period. If not exercised by 5 p.m. on the fifth business day from acceptance of this agreement, then this contingency shall automatically expire. Um, and so that would be like item A in your other terms and conditions. Then item B and your other terms and conditions would be for, seller to provide buyer with complete property financials for the past 24 months within 2 business days of acceptance of this agreement. And if that offer gets accepted, then now, really what it comes down to, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, is that only now that we've put pen to paper and submitted our offer and the offer's been accepted, only now is the seller properly motivated to give us the information that we need, right? So we put the we create an obligation for the seller to provide us with the financial information, and then we give ourselves a period of time to review it. If everything checks out, we can move forward with the purchase. If anything doesn't check out, we can exercise the due diligence clause to terminate the agreement, get our earnest money back, and move on and try and find another property. Alternately, if the expenses come back more than expected, we could go back to the seller and give them 2 choices. We could say, hey, still like the property, but the expenses are a little bit more than we were expecting them to be. So here's an addendum bringing the purchase price down by 25 grand. Please sign it. And if the sellers sign it, then great, you got yourself your deal. If the sellers don't sign it, just make sure that you have sufficient time remaining in your due diligence period to say, okay, well then we're out of here, right? So that due diligence period is your window of time to either decide to move forward, try and renegotiate, or make sure that you back out before the expiration of that time period. So that's it for now. I think. Let me make sure there's nothing else I want to talk about. Deliver the offer. Creating the contingency. Oh, there was the. That's what it was. Okay. So, if you're a seller and you're trying to market a property, and you want it to be as attractive for buyers as possible, you want that cap rate to be, as a seller, you want that cap rate to be as low as possible. That means you're getting a lot of money out of the property. But to make the property attractive for buyers, you need that cap rate to be higher. So that's a motivator for sellers to kind of downplay the expenses a little bit. They'll be like, oh, well, I didn't get the data. I was just kind of estimating what it was, and I didn't realize I was a little bit off. So they'll fudge the numbers a little bit to make the expenses seem lower, because that, of course, has the effect of the cap rate being higher, and that makes the property more desirable to a prospective buyer. So, I would recommend, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Investor, one thing that I'll do when we ask the seller, in the agreement, we're going to create an obligation for the seller to provide us with the property financials. We'll ask them not only for a copy of their books, but we'll also ask them for a copy of the property's Schedule C. Because when you own an investment property and you file your taxes, the way that you declare your income or loss from that investment property with your federal filing is with the Schedule C. And so when you're trying to sell a property, you're motivated to kind of talk down your expenses. But when you're filing your taxes, you're going to report every single dollar of expenses, right? Because the more you can show that you spent, the less earnings there are, and therefore the less you're going to be taxed. So asking a seller for their books very well may give you some watered down numbers, where if you ask for the Schedule C, you'll tend to get more real numbers. So seller to provide buyer with property financials, with full property financials, including IRS Form Schedule C for the past 2 years, within 2 business days of acceptance of this agreement. And that way you'll get not only their books, but the Schedule C, and you'll know that you've got a fair and reasonable accounting of the expenses for your client. All right. That was the last thing. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you guys found this information helpful. And tomorrow morning, I am doing the class on. Tomorrow is open houses, I think. Yeah. So tomorrow morning is how to conduct an effective open house at 11, and then Friday I'm doing CMA training also at 11, and I'll be streaming them both. So check the dashboard for links. I'll be posting them about 11 o'clock both days. And until then, thanks a lot, guys. Talk to you soon. Have a great night. Thanks. Bye-bye.